If someone had told me that the most dangerous moment of my marriage would not come with shouting, not with slammed doors, not with another woman standing in front of me, I would have laughed. Because in England, marriages do not usually end dramatically. They fade, quietly, politely, over cups of tea that go cold. That is what I believed. On the evening everything began to fall apart, I was standing in my kitchen at exactly 6:20. The oven was on. The house smelled of roasted chicken. Outside, the streetlights were coming on, one by one. It felt safe, ordinary, predictable. And that was the problem. My son did not come running when I opened the door. No footsteps, no excited voice, no small arms wrapping around my legs. Just silence. At first, I told myself not to overthink it. Children grow, they change, they get tired. That is what mothers tell themselves when something feels wrong, but they are not ready to name it yet. I called his name. Once, then again. He appeared in the doorway slowly, wearing his pajamas even though it was still early. His eyes looked heavy, not sleepy, heavy. And when he spoke, his voice was so quiet it barely sounded like him. "Mum, can I ask you something?" I bent down to his level, smiling, pretending my chest was not tightening. "What is it, love?" He hesitated, looked past me, then whispered, "Do I really have to keep taking the vitamins Daddy's friend gives me?" In that moment, my body went cold. Not fear, not panic, something worse. The instinct that tells a mother that something has already happened and she is the last one to know. If you are watching this and you want to understand how a perfectly ordinary British family turned into a crime scene without raising its voice, comment number 1 right now and watch until the end. Before everything broke apart, our life looked exactly the way people expect a family in England to look. Quiet, orderly, respectable. We lived in a modest, semi-detached house in Reading, a short walk from the primary school, 10 minutes by car from the station. The kind of street where neighbours nod politely, but rarely ask questions. Every weekday followed the same rhythm. I woke up at 6:30, not because I enjoyed mornings, but because routine made everything feel under control. The kettle always came on first, that soft clicking sound, followed by the low hum as the water heated. I liked that moment. It was predictable, reliable. Daniel usually came down a few minutes later, already dressed for work. Dark trousers, pressed shirt, his hair neat, as if nothing in life could really surprise him. He worked as a project coordinator for an engineering firm in London. Not flashy, not risky, the kind of job people trust. He drank his tea standing by the kitchen window, scrolling through emails on his phone, occasionally frowning at something work-related. "Train looks delayed again," he would say, more to the room than to me. I would nod. That was as dramatic as our mornings got. Our son, Oliver, usually appeared last. He was 7, small for his age, with a thoughtful face and eyes that seemed to notice everything. He moved quietly through the house, never running, never shouting. Sometimes I worried he was too serious, but teachers always told me the same thing. He is very sensitive, they said, very kind. He notices when other children are upset. I used to feel proud when they said that. Breakfast was simple: toast, cereal, sometimes scrambled eggs on Fridays if there was time. Daniel always reminded Oliver to sit properly, to finish his milk, to pack his homework. Nothing harsh, nothing loud, just calm instructions spoken in a steady voice. After breakfast, Daniel left first. A quick kiss on my cheek, a brief hug for Oliver. "I will be home by 7, he said most evenings. And most evenings he was. Oliver and I walked to school together. The air usually smelled of damp pavement and fresh leaves. In winter, our breath showed. In spring, the mornings felt lighter. Oliver held my hand, his grip gentle but firm. "Have a good day, Mum," he always said at the gate, as if he was the one sending me off. Then I went to work. I worked in administration for a local housing association, nothing glamorous, but steady, structured, safe. I liked that about it. I finished at 5:30 most days, stopped by the shop on the corner, picked up milk or bread or whatever we needed. By the time I got home, the house was usually quiet. Daniel was still at work. Oliver was either in his room or sitting at the dining table with his homework. The house always smelt the same in the evenings: cleaning spray, warm food, sometimes laundry detergent. I cooked while Oliver told me about school. Not excited stories, just facts. What he learned, what book they were reading, which classmate got told off for talking. Daniel arrived later, hung his coat carefully, placed his keys in the same bowl by the door every time. Dinner was calm. We sat together at the table, no phones. That was Daniel's rule. He asked Oliver about school. I talked about work. Daniel talked about deadlines and meetings. Nothing felt hidden. Nothing felt wrong. After dinner, Oliver washed his hands and brushed his teeth. Daniel helped him with reading when he had time. If not, I sat on the edge of Oliver's bed and listened as he read aloud. He stumbled over long words, paused to think, looked at me for reassurance. "Take your time," I always said. "There is no rush." Lights went out at 8:30. Daniel and I watched the news, sometimes a series. Sometimes we sat in silence, each doing our own thing. By 10, the house was asleep. From the outside, we looked like the kind of family people describe as lucky. No shouting, no scandals, no obvious cracks. I believed that stability meant safety, that routine meant protection. I believed that if something truly terrible were happening, I would feel it, hear it, see it. I did not yet understand that the most dangerous things can exist quietly, hidden inside ordinary days, and that the calm I trusted so deeply was only the surface. At first, nothing felt serious enough to name. It was just small things, the kind of things mothers notice, then quietly explain away. Oliver started sleeping more. Not deep, peaceful sleep, but heavy sleep, the kind where he was hard to wake, even when I called his name twice. He would come home from school, drop his bag by the door, and go straight upstairs without saying much. No complaints, no stories, no excitement, just a quiet, "Hello, Mum," spoken without lifting his eyes. I told myself it was a phase. Children change. Teachers say that all the time. They grow, they retreat, they become more private. That was the explanation I chose. But the pattern kept repeating. Every afternoon I found him lying on his bed, still in his school uniform, his shoes kicked off carelessly, his body curled in on itself. Sometimes he slept before dinner, sometimes he slept through it. When I woke him gently, his eyes looked unfocused, as if he had just been pulled out of somewhere very far away. "Are you feeling unwell, love?" I asked one evening. He shook his head. "No." "Are you tired?" Another shake. That answer stayed with me, because tired children usually complain. They whine. They ask to stay up later or go to bed earlier. Oliver did neither. He simply accepted sleep, as if it was no longer his choice. At school, his teacher mentioned it casually at pickup. "He seems a little quieter lately," she said. "Still very polite, still very kind, just a bit distant." Distant. That was the word. At home, he stopped sitting at the table after meals. He stopped asking questions, stopped interrupting adult conversations. He began watching me closely instead. Whenever Daniel was in the room, Oliver stayed silent. Not afraid, not tense, just alert, like a child listening for something he did not want to hear again. One evening, Daniel noticed it too. "He is becoming very well behaved," he said, half smiling. "Must be growing up." I smiled back. That was the kind of thing people say when they want everything to stay normal. The nights were the hardest. Oliver fell asleep quickly, too quickly. No turning, no calling out, no asking for water, just sleep. Sometimes I stood by his door listening. His breathing was slow, even, almost too steady. I told myself not to be dramatic. There were no bruises, no marks, no obvious signs of illness. He still went to school, still did his homework, still smiled when spoken to. But something was missing. The noise. The small chaos children bring into a house. Our home felt quieter each day, not peaceful, muted, like someone had turned the volume down. I started paying attention to time. What days Daniel worked from home? What days he came back earlier than usual? What days Oliver seemed most tired? The overlap made my stomach tighten, though I did not know why yet. When I asked Oliver what he did after school, his answers became shorter. Homework, TV, nothing. Nothing was not an answer he used before. One afternoon, I sat beside him on the sofa. He leaned away slightly, not in rejection, but as if he needed space. "Is something bothering you?" I asked softly. He looked at the floor, then at the door, then back at me. "No." That was when I realized something important. Whatever was happening, it was happening quietly, and it was happening repeatedly. Not once, not twice. Enough times to teach a child when to speak and when to stay silent. That night, after Oliver had gone to bed, I stood alone in the kitchen. The house was still. The clock ticked loudly on the wall. I remember thinking one sentence, clearer than anything else. This is not random anymore. If you are still watching at this point and something in your chest feels tight, comment number 1 now. Sometimes recognizing the pattern is the moment everything changes. There are moments in life when time does not speed up. It slows. It stretches. It gives you just enough space to realize that whatever comes next will divide your life into before and after. That evening, I did not know it yet. I was standing at the kitchen sink, rinsing plates under warm water, listening to the familiar sounds of our house. The hum of the fridge, the ticking clock, the low murmur of the television from the living room. Daniel was on the sofa. Oliver was meant to be in his room. Everything was where it should have been. Then I heard footsteps behind me, soft, careful. I turned around. Oliver was standing in the doorway. He had changed into his pajamas, even though it was still early. His hair was slightly damp, as if he had washed his hands too many times. "Are you hungry, love?" I asked, forcing brightness into my voice. He shook his head. He did not come closer. He stayed exactly where he was, one hand gripping the doorframe. "Mum," he said quietly, "can I ask you something?" I dried my hands on the towel and knelt down in front of him. "Of course you can." He did not answer right away. Instead, he looked over my shoulder towards the living room, towards his father. Then he looked back at me and lowered his voice even more. "So you do not hear," he added. My stomach tightened. "What is it, love?" I asked. He swallowed. "Do I really have to keep taking the vitamins?" For a second, I did not understand the question. "Vitamins," I repeated. "What vitamins?" The way his face changed told me everything. Not confusion, not surprise, relief. "The ones Daddy's friend gives me," he said. "The lady who comes when you are at work." The room felt suddenly smaller. "What lady?" I asked slowly. "And what vitamins?" He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, a movement so familiar I had seen it 100 times before when he was nervous. "She says they help me concentrate," he continued, "and help me sleep properly." Sleep. That word landed heavily between us. "And when do you take them?" I asked. "When she comes," he said. "Usually after school." After school. When I was not there. I kept my voice calm, too calm. "And how do they make you feel?" He thought for a moment. "Sleepy," he said. "Really sleepy." He paused. "Sometimes I wake up and it is dark," he added, "and my head hurts." I felt a sharp coldness move up my spine. "Does Daddy know about these vitamins?" I asked. He nodded. "He says I am being good," Oliver said, "and that I should not tell you because you worry too much." That was when I stopped breathing. Not visibly, not enough for him to notice, but inside something shifted. "Does she give them to you every time?" I asked. He shook his head. "Only when she needs to talk to Daddy," he said, "so I can sleep and not interrupt." I stared at my son, 7 years old, standing in his pajamas, explaining this as if it were normal, as if it made sense. "Can you show me the vitamins?" I asked gently. He hesitated. "She said it is a secret," he whispered, "but I do not like them." "Where are they kept?" I asked. "In my desk drawer," he said, "next to my pencils." I reached out and took his hands. They were warm, too warm. "You do not have to take anything any more," I said, "not until I check." He looked up at me, searching my face. "Are you angry?" he asked. "No," I said, "never at you." "At Daddy?" he asked. I did not answer that. Instead, I pulled him into my arms. He relaxed instantly, as if his body had been waiting for permission to let go. In that moment, standing in my kitchen, holding my child, I understood one thing clearly. Whatever those pills were, whatever that woman was doing, this was no longer about trust. It was about danger. That night, after Oliver fell asleep, I stood alone in the hallway. The house was quiet. Daniel laughed softly at something on television. The fridge hummed. The clock ticked. And I realized that the life I thought I was living had already ended. I just had not caught up to it yet. That night, I did not confront Daniel. I did not raise my voice. I did not ask questions. I did not even look at him differently. I tucked Oliver into bed as usual, read him 2 pages from his book, kissed his forehead, switched off the light. He fell asleep almost instantly, too instantly. I stayed beside him longer than normal, watching his chest rise and fall, counting each breath, as if the rhythm itself might tell me something. It did not. When I finally left his room, I closed the door quietly and stood in the hallway for a long time. I knew what I had to do next. I just was not ready to hear the answer. The following morning, I took the day off work. I told Daniel I had paperwork to sort out. He barely looked up from his phone. After dropping Oliver at school, I drove straight to the clinic. It was not a hospital, just a small GP surgery a few streets away from where we lived. I chose it deliberately, somewhere ordinary, somewhere calm. I did not want drama. I wanted clarity. The doctor was a woman in her 40s, soft voice, tired eyes, the kind of person who had seen too much to be easily shocked. I placed the small plastic bottle on her desk. "I need you to look at this," I said. "It was given to my son." She picked it up, turned it slowly in her hands and frowned. "There is no label," she said. "No," I replied. "I was told it was a vitamin." She did not comment on that. Instead, she opened the bottle, tipped one tablet into her palm, and studied it closely. She did not smell it. She did not taste it. She simply looked. Then she looked at me. "How old is your son?" she asked. 7, I said. She nodded once, very slowly. "I cannot confirm exactly what this is without lab testing," she said carefully. "But I can tell you what it is not." I waited. It is not a standard supplement. It is not a children's vitamin. And it is certainly not something a child should be taking regularly. The room felt quieter. "What could it be?" I asked. She hesitated. "There are medications that look like this," she said. "Sedatives. Medications prescribed for adults with severe sleep disorders, anxiety, sometimes neurological conditions." My mouth went dry. "Would that explain the sleep?" I asked. "And the headaches?" She nodded. "Yes," she said, "it would." I felt my hands begin to shake. "Is it dangerous?" I asked. She did not answer immediately. "It depends on dosage," she said, "and frequency, but for a child there are risks." "What kind of risks?" She folded her hands on the desk. "Dependency," she said. "Disruption of normal brain development, problems with concentration, emotional regulation, in some cases, long-term cognitive effects." She paused. "Especially if taken without medical supervision." I stared at the wall behind her. White, unmarked, ordinary. "This could affect him permanently," I said. "It could," she replied. "That is why I am concerned." Concerned. Such a mild word for something that felt like a cliff edge. "Who gave this to him?" she asked. I swallowed. "A woman," I said. "A friend of his father." She closed the bottle and pushed it back towards me. "You need to stop this immediately," she said. "He should not take another tablet, not one." "He already stopped," I said. "Last night." "Good," she replied. "That may help limit the effects." Limit. Not erase, not undo. Limit. "I would strongly recommend further testing," she continued. "And if what I suspect is confirmed, this is not just a medical issue." I met her eyes. "This is safeguarding," she said, "and possibly criminal." The word criminal landed heavily. "I will write a referral," she said, "and I advise you to document everything, dates, times, who was present." I nodded, though my mind felt far away. When I left the clinic, the sky was grey, not stormy, not dramatic, just heavy. I sat in my car for several minutes, hands still on the steering wheel, unable to turn the key. Up until that moment, a part of me had still hoped there was a harmless explanation, a misunderstanding, a mistake, a bad idea taken too far. That hope disappeared as I stared through the windscreen at nothing in particular. This was no longer about trust, or marriage, or even betrayal. This was about harm, real harm, to my child. That afternoon, I picked Oliver up from school and watched him carefully as we walked home. He chatted quietly about a maths worksheet, about a boy in his class who lost his jumper. His voice sounded normal, his steps steady. No one would have known what his body had been exposed to. That night, after he went to bed, I stood in the kitchen and looked at the bottle again. Small, white, silent. It did not look dangerous. That was the worst part. If you are still listening and you are starting to feel that slow tightening in your chest, leave a single comment, just the number 1, because from here on, nothing stays ordinary. Once you know that something is wrong, you start noticing everything. Not in a dramatic way, not like a detective in a film, more like a mother who suddenly realizes that the house she knows by heart has begun to change shape. The first thing I noticed was money. Not missing money, not large sums, just small amounts appearing where they should not have been. One evening, while Oliver was in the bath, I opened his desk drawer to look for a spare pencil. That was when I saw it. A folded stack of notes, pushed to the back behind his colouring books. I counted them slowly. 20, 20, 10, 10. £160. I sat there for a moment, the drawer still open, my fingers resting on the edge. 7-year-old children do not have hidden cash, not in neat piles, not tucked away carefully. When Oliver came back into the room, wrapped in his towel, I closed the drawer quietly. I did not ask him about the money, not yet. Instead, I watched. The second thing I noticed was time. Daniel had always been predictable. Trains, meetings, deadlines. Now his schedule softened. Some days he worked from home without warning. Some days he arrived earlier than expected. Some days he said nothing at all until he was already through the door. I had a gap between meetings, he explained once. Thought I would come back early. Another time, I cancelled something last minute. None of it sounded unreasonable. Each explanation made sense on its own. Together, they did not. I began to track it quietly. The days Daniel was home earlier were often the same days Oliver seemed most tired. Not every time, just enough to make my stomach tighten. I started noting details in my head. Which shoes Daniel wore, whether his coat smelled of outside air or warm rooms, whether he went upstairs straight away or lingered in the kitchen. Small things. Too small to accuse anyone of anything, but too many to ignore. The third thing I noticed was how Daniel talked, or rather, how his words stopped matching his actions. "She is just a colleague," he said one evening, when a name I did not recognize appeared on his phone. He said it casually, too casually. "A friend from work," he added, "nothing important." He turned the phone face down on the table. I did not ask who she was. I did not ask why she needed to text him at 7:30 in the evening. I asked something else. "Does she come here?" He looked up, surprised. "Sometimes," he said, "for work things. Why?" I nodded, just nodded. Later that night, after Daniel had fallen asleep, I checked Oliver's desk drawer again. The money was still there. I counted it again. Now there was more. £240. My hands began to shake. The next day, I watched Oliver more closely than ever. I noticed how he checked the hallway before speaking, how he lowered his voice when Daniel was nearby, how he froze slightly when the doorbell rang. "Who is it?" he asked once, before I had even stood up. "No one yet," I said. He relaxed. That reaction stayed with me. One evening, while Daniel was cooking, I stood beside him at the counter. The knife moved steadily in his hand. The radio played quietly. Everything looked normal. "When does your colleague usually come round?" I asked, keeping my tone light. He did not stop chopping. "Oh, you know," he said, "whenever it is convenient." Convenient. "For her or for you?" I asked. He laughed softly. "Do not start imagining things," he said. "You are overthinking again." Overthinking. The word landed sharply. I watched his face as he spoke, relaxed, unbothered, too relaxed. Later, I checked the calendar on his phone while he was in the shower. I did not recognize half the appointments. Blocked time, unnamed meetings, short gaps marked only with dots. I closed the phone before guilt could stop me. That night, I lay awake beside him, listening to his breathing. It was slow, even. He slept like someone with nothing to hide. I did not. The final piece came quietly. One afternoon, I arrived home earlier than usual. The house was empty, silent. Oliver was still at school. Daniel was meant to be in London. I walked into Oliver's room and opened the desk drawer again. This time, beneath the money, I found a small white bottle. No label, no writing, just a twist cap worn from frequent use. I did not open it. I did not need to. My hands felt numb as I closed the drawer. In that moment, several questions pressed in at once. Why was money being given to my child? Why did it increase on certain days? Why did Oliver sleep so heavily after school? Why did Daniel's schedule shift without warning? Why did his explanations never quite match? And why did none of it happen when I was at home? I did not have answers yet, but I no longer believed in coincidence. That evening, Daniel came home smiling. "Long day," he said. "Glad to be back." I smiled back. Inside, everything had changed. If you are still listening and you have started asking questions you never expected to ask, leave a simple comment, just the number 1. Sometimes the truth does not arrive loudly. It gathers quietly until there is nowhere left to hide. There is a moment when anger would have been easier, a moment when shouting would have felt natural, justified, even necessary. I could have confronted Daniel, asked him who she was, thrown the bottle on the table, demanded answers. Any reasonable person would have. But I did not. Because the moment I truly understood that my child had been put in danger, anger stopped being useful. Fear took its place. Not loud fear, not panic, the quiet kind, the kind that makes you think carefully before every word you say. That night, I lay awake beside Daniel, listening to him breathe. Slow, even, untroubled. He slept like someone who believed the world was still under control. I did not. My mind moved in circles, returning again and again to the same thought. If I confront him now, everything changes. He will deny it, minimize it, explain it away. And whatever is happening will disappear underground. I would lose the only thing I had right now, visibility. So the next morning, I did something that surprised even me. I acted normal. I made breakfast. I packed lunches. I asked Daniel about his meetings. I smiled when he smiled. I nodded when he spoke. Every movement felt deliberate, measured, as if I was walking across thin ice, aware that one wrong step would crack everything open. Inside, my body stayed tense. My shoulders ached. My stomach refused food. My hands trembled whenever I stood still for too long. I learned to keep moving. Oliver watched me closely. Children notice changes long before adults do. When I kissed him goodbye at the school gate, he held onto my coat longer than usual. "You are coming back later, right?" he asked. "Always," I said, and I meant it in every way that mattered. At home, I began to prepare quietly. Not plans, not revenge. Evidence. I wrote things down, dates, times, what Daniel said, what Oliver said, how Oliver slept, how long. I hid the notebook at the back of a kitchen cupboard behind cleaning products. I memorized numbers instead of writing them, amounts of money, times on the clock. The day's patterns repeated. I became careful with my questions. I did not ask why. I asked when. When did that meeting finish? When will you be back? When is she coming by again? Daniel answered easily, without suspicion. That hurt more than if he had hesitated. At night, when the house was quiet, fear crept in. What if I was wrong? What if I was overreacting? What if confronting him now would somehow make things worse? Then I would think of Oliver's voice, lowered, careful, and the doubt disappeared. The hardest part was pretending nothing had changed, laughing at the right moments, listening without reacting, touching Daniel's arm when he passed me in the kitchen. It felt like betrayal. But this time I was betraying an illusion, not a person. I watched Daniel with new eyes, the way he checked his phone before speaking, the way he avoided certain questions, the way his mood lifted on days when his schedule shifted unexpectedly. I did not comment. I collected. I also paid attention to Oliver. I made sure he was never alone in the house when I was not there. If Daniel worked from home, I adjusted my schedule. If I could not, I arranged for Oliver to stay with a friend. I told Daniel it was for convenience, for routine. He accepted that explanation easily, too easily. Fear followed me everywhere. In the car, in the shower, in the quiet moments between one task and the next. Sometimes my heart raced for no clear reason. Sometimes I felt sick just standing in the kitchen, looking at the same surfaces that had once felt safe. But alongside fear, something else began to grow. Control. Not power, not confidence. Control over my reactions, over my timing, over what I revealed and what I kept to myself. I understood something then. Confrontation would give me answers. Evidence would give me protection. So I waited. I waited for the pattern to repeat, for the schedule to align, for the next small crack to appear. I waited for proof that could not be explained away with calm words and reasonable excuses. That decision changed everything. Because once I stopped needing him to tell me the truth, I was free to find it myself. And from that moment on, nothing I did was accidental. Everything was deliberate. Once the decision was made, everything became practical, not emotional, not moral, practical. I did not think in terms of right or wrong. I thought in terms of angles, visibility, timing. I needed to see what was happening in my house when I was not there. Not what Daniel said was happening, not what I suspected, what actually happened. The camera came from a small electronics shop near the shopping centre, the kind of place people visit to buy chargers and phone cases. I did not browse, I did not ask questions. I knew exactly what I needed. Something small, something ordinary, something that would not be noticed because it belonged there. I chose a camera disguised as a plug adapter. White, plain, no lights, no sound. It looked exactly like the chargers we already had in every room. At home, I waited until the house was empty. Oliver was at school. Daniel was in London. The quiet felt different now. Not safe, not calm, exposed. I walked through the house slowly, seeing it as if for the first time. The hallway, too narrow, the angle wrong. The kitchen, too busy, too many surfaces. The living room felt right, not because it was central, but because people relaxed there. They forgot themselves. I plugged the camera into the wall behind the bookcase, just high enough to see the sofa and the door. I adjusted it by millimeters, stepping back, then forward again, checking the frame on my phone. Too much floor, too little door. I moved it again. When the image finally settled, my chest tightened. It was perfect. The sofa, the coffee table, the doorway. Anyone entering the room would be visible. Anyone sitting down would stay in frame. I downloaded the app and connected it to my phone. Username, password, notifications off. I did not want alerts. I wanted control. I tested the sound. I spoke quietly, standing where Daniel usually stood. "My name is not important," I said, just to hear my own voice through the screen. The audio was clear, too clear. I turned it down. I did not want to hear everything. I wanted to hear enough. I unplugged it, plugged it back in. The connection held. Then I waited. The first day, nothing happened. The living room stayed empty. The footage showed sunlight moving across the carpet, dust floating in the air. Ordinary. The second day, Daniel came home early. I watched from my phone, sitting in my car outside the school. He dropped his bag, checked his phone, paced the room. Then he left again. I did not feel relief. I felt confirmation. The third day, I adjusted my schedule. I told Daniel I had to stay late, that Oliver would go to a friend's house. He nodded. Too easily. I parked down the street and watched the app. At 15 minutes past 3, the front door opened. Daniel stepped inside. He did not look surprised. He did not check his watch. He waited. 10 minutes later, the door opened again. A woman walked in. She smiled as she took off her coat. Familiar, comfortable. She did not look around. She did not hesitate. She walked straight towards Daniel and kissed him. Not quickly, not nervously, as if this was routine. My hands began to shake, but I did not look away. They sat on the sofa. She laughed. He laughed. I turned the volume down but kept watching. At one point, Daniel stood up and said, "He should be asleep soon." The woman nodded. I felt my stomach drop. I did not need to see more that day. I closed the app, sat in silence, breathed slowly until my heart slowed down. Over the next week, I watched patterns form. The days Daniel worked from home, the days he came back early, the days Oliver seemed most tired. The woman always arrived after school hours, never late, never rushed. She moved through the house as if it belonged to her. She used our mugs. She sat in my chair. Once she opened Oliver's bedroom door. I stopped the recording. I did not watch that part. I could not. Instead, I focused on what I needed. Proof. Dates. Times. Duration. I saved clips, labelled them carefully, backed them up to a secure folder. I watched the footage at night with headphones on while Daniel slept beside me, his breathing steady, unaware. The house I lived in was split in two, what it looked like and what it was. Each clip stripped away another layer of doubt. This was not a misunderstanding, not a mistake, not a lapse. It was organized. Repeated. Planned. And I was finally seeing it. The camera did not lie. It did not soften the truth. It did not look away. Neither did I. By the time I finished collecting what I needed, my fear had changed shape. It was still there, but now it sat beside something stronger. Certainty. And once you have that, everything else becomes possible. The first time I watched the full recording, I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not move. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone resting on my knee, headphones on, breathing shallowly, as if even air might interfere with what I was about to see. The living room filled the screen. My living room. The sofa I had chosen. The rug I had vacuumed that morning. The door I locked every night. Daniel walked in first. He loosened his tie, took off his jacket, placed his keys in the bowl by the door, exactly the way he did every evening. He checked his phone, smiled, then sat down. 10 minutes passed. Nothing happened. Then the door opened again. She stepped inside, mid-30s, well-dressed, hair neatly styled. She did not pause, did not look around. She closed the door behind her and walked straight towards him. He stood up. They kissed. Not a quick kiss, not a guilty one, a familiar one. She laughed softly. "You look tired," she said. "I had to rush," Daniel replied. "I wanted to make sure he was asleep." She glanced towards the hallway. "He is out," she said. "I heard him earlier." Daniel nodded. "He always is," he said. "Once he takes it, he is gone." They sat down together. She crossed her legs, rested her hand on his knee. "You really should not give him so much," she said. "It makes him too drowsy." Daniel shrugged. "It works," he replied, "and it keeps him out of the way." "Out of the way," she smiled. "It is only temporary," she said. "Once we sort things out, we will not need to be so careful." Daniel leaned back against the sofa. "I just need time," he said. "She notices everything." She laughed again. "She notices nothing," she replied. "If she did, we would not be sitting here." Daniel did not argue. Instead, he reached for her hand. They talked quietly for a while, about work, about plans, about dates. Not once did he mention our son by name. He referred to him as the boy. The woman stood up. "I should go soon," she said. "I do not want to be here when she gets back." Daniel nodded. "I will message you," he said. "Same time tomorrow." She paused by the door. "Do not forget," she said. "Less this time. He is still little." Daniel smiled. "I know," he replied. "I am careful." Careful. The word echoed in my ears. She left. Daniel locked the door behind her, stood still for a moment. Then he walked into the kitchen, poured himself a drink, and turned on the television, as if nothing had happened. I watched the screen long after the room was empty. I rewound the clip, watched it again and again. Each time a new detail surfaced. The way she moved through the house, the way he did not hesitate, the way they spoke about my child as if he were an inconvenience. The next clip was worse. Another day, same time. This time she arrived earlier. Daniel was already waiting. "You gave it to him already?" she asked. He nodded. "He was yawning," he said. "It will kick in soon." She smiled with relief. "Good," she said. "I cannot stand interruptions." They laughed together. I did not. In the following clips, their words became clearer. "She will never leave," Daniel said once, "not without proof." "Then make sure there is none," the woman replied. Another day. "You promised things would change," she said. "They will," Daniel answered. "I just need him quiet for now." Quiet. That was the word they used most. Not safe, not asleep. Quiet. I watched them sit on my sofa, drink from my mugs, use my space. I watched my husband become someone I did not recognize. Not cruel, not angry, just indifferent, the most frightening kind. At no point did he look worried. At no point did he hesitate. This was not a mistake. It was a system. When the final clip ended, I removed the headphones and sat in silence. The house around me was dark. Daniel lay asleep beside me, his back turned, breathing slow and steady. I did not touch him. I did not look at him. I stared at the ceiling and understood something with absolute clarity. The man sleeping next to me was not confused. He was not trapped. He was choosing this, and he had chosen it over our child. I did not cry that night. Tears would come later. What came first was something colder: resolve. The kind that does not shake, the kind that waits. Because once you see the truth this clearly, there is no unseeing it, and there is no going back. I did not rush. That was the first mistake they expected me to make. Instead, I planned, quietly, precisely, with the patience of someone who had already lost everything and therefore had nothing left to gamble. I spoke to the school first. Not accusations, not explanations, just facts. I asked for a copy of Oliver's attendance records, his tiredness notes, the days he had been sent to rest during lessons. I spoke to the GP again, provided the footage, provided dates, provided names. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I let silence do the work. Then I spoke to the police. Not emergency, not dramatic. A scheduled appointment. A small room, a desk. 2 officers who listened without interrupting. They watched the clips. They did not react. They asked questions, specific ones. How often? Who had access? Was the child aware? I answered carefully. He thought it was vitamins. He trusted his father. That was when the room changed. The plan formed quickly after that. Not a confrontation, not a confession. A moment. One moment where everything would be seen by everyone who needed to see it. I adjusted my schedule again. I told Daniel I would be working late, that Oliver would stay with me until later than usual. He nodded, relaxed. Too relaxed. That afternoon, I picked Oliver up early. We sat in the car together, engine off, street quiet. I knelt in front of him. There are some people coming later, I said. They are here to help. He frowned. Am I in trouble? No, I said. You did nothing wrong. He looked relieved. What do I do? You tell the truth, I said, just like you always do. He nodded, brave, small. I held his hand and felt how cold it was. At 4:15, the camera went live. At 4:20, Daniel arrived home. At 4:30, she arrived. Same routine, same smiles. They did not know that 2 unmarked cars were parked at the end of the street. They did not know that the living room was no longer private. They sat on the sofa. She laughed. Did you give it to him already? Daniel nodded. He took it easily today, he said. He is used to it now. Used to it. The front door opened, not softly, not quietly, firm. 3 officers stepped inside. Police, one of them said. Stay where you are, she screamed. Daniel froze. What is this? He said. What is going on? One officer moved towards the table. What is in the bottle? Silence. The officer turned to Oliver, who stood beside me in the doorway. Can you tell me what that is? He asked gently. Oliver looked at the bottle. That is my vitamin, he said. I take it when Daddy says I need to sleep. The room stopped breathing. The woman began to cry. No, 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 she said. This is a mistake. Daniel opened his mouth. No sound came out. An officer picked up the bottle, placed it into an evidence bag. Another officer spoke. You are both being detained on suspicion of child endangerment. The words landed heavily. Daniel finally found his voice. You cannot do this, he said. He is my son. The officer looked at him. That is why we are here. They separated them. Handcuffs clicked. Not loudly, not dramatically. Definitive. She tried to reach for Daniel. He did not look at her. He looked at me. For the first time in weeks, he looked afraid. "Please," he said, "we can talk about this." I did not answer. I knelt beside Oliver again. "You did very well," I said. He nodded, lip trembling. "Can we go home now?" "Yes," I said, "we can." The officers escorted them out. Neighbours opened curtains. Phones appeared. No one spoke. The door closed. The house went quiet. I sat on the sofa and felt the fabric under my hands. My sofa. My space. Oliver leaned against me. "Is Daddy sick?" he asked. "Something like that," I said. Later that night, after Oliver fell asleep, I stood alone in the living room. The camera still blinked silently. I unplugged it. I did not need it anymore. The truth had stepped into the light and introduced itself properly. If you are still listening and your heart is racing right now, leave a simple comment, just the number 1. Because this was not the end. It was the moment everything finally became real. The hours that followed felt unreal, not dramatic, not chaotic, structured. Paperwork, statements, rooms with neutral walls and low voices. Oliver was taken first, a female officer, a soft tone, a chair sized for a child. I was allowed to stay nearby, close enough for him to see me, far enough to let him speak freely. They did not ask leading questions. They did not rush him. They asked him about routines, about sleep, about the bottle. "When did you take it? Who gave it to you? How did it make you feel?" Oliver answered simply, "When Daddy said, it made me sleepy. My head felt funny sometimes." No embellishment, no fear, just facts. That was enough. I was questioned next. Timeline, access, history. I handed over the footage, the notes, the records from school, the GP referral. Each document slid across the table with a quiet finality. The officer nodded, wrote, checked. "You did the right thing," she said. I did not respond. I was past needing reassurance. Daniel was interviewed last. I did not see it, but I heard about it later. He denied nothing at first. He tried explanation, stress, pressure, poor judgment. It was only to help him sleep. It was not dangerous. It was temporary. Then the footage was played, the audio, his voice, her voice. Silence followed, the kind that cannot be filled. The charges were explained calmly. Child endangerment, administering medication without prescription, conspiracy. Each word landed heavily. The woman broke first. She cried. She insisted Daniel was in control, that she only advised. Daniel did not defend her. He stared at the table. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat. "I did not think it would go this far," he said. That was the moment something in him collapsed. Not guilt, realization. The understanding that his version of events no longer mattered. Social services were involved immediately. A safety plan was put in place. Temporary orders, supervised contact only. I listened, signed, agreed. Everything was done methodically. No raised voices, no satisfaction. Just consequence. When I finally saw Daniel again, it was through glass. He looked smaller, older. The confidence he carried so easily had drained out of him. He pressed the phone to his ear. "I never meant to hurt him," he said. I did not respond immediately. "You did," I replied. "That is the only part that matters now." He swallowed. "They will take him away from me," he said. I shook my head. "No," I said. "You gave him away yourself." He closed his eyes. For the first time, he did not argue. In court, weeks later, the details were repeated. Carefully, publicly. The footage, the expert testimony, the timeline. Daniel did not look at me. He did not look at Oliver. When the judgment came, it was measured. Restrictions, mandatory programs, criminal record, not revenge, accountability. Outside the courtroom, there were no cameras, no speeches, just air. Oliver held my hand tightly. "Is it finished?" he asked. "It is finished enough," I said. That night, back in our home, I packed Daniel's remaining things. Not in anger, not in haste. I placed each item in a box, labelled it, closed the lid. The house felt different, lighter, quieter. Oliver slept through the night. No medication, no interruptions. His breathing was steady. I sat beside his bed and listened. Justice is not loud. It does not announce itself. It arrives in small, solid moments, in safety, in silence, in sleep that comes naturally, and that was enough. Leaving did not feel dramatic. There were no suitcases thrown down the stairs, no final speeches, no slammed doors. It felt quiet, intentional. I chose a morning when Oliver was already smiling. We packed only what we needed, clothes, books, one framed photo. I did not look back at the house, not because it hurt too much, but because it no longer held anything I needed. The new place was smaller, a short train ride away, a second-floor flat with narrow stairs and windows that caught the afternoon light. It did not look impressive. It did not need to. The first night, Oliver slept in a bed pushed up against the wall. A new duvet, a familiar pillow. He asked one question. "Is this where we live now?" "Yes," I said, "for a while." He nodded, accepted it. Children adapt faster than adults. The days that followed found a new rhythm, slower, softer. Mornings without tension, breakfast without checking the clock. Oliver began waking on his own, not startled, not confused, just awake. The shadows under his eyes faded. His questions returned. His laughter came back in short bursts, then longer ones. We walked to school together, sometimes in silence, sometimes with stories about nothing important. That was how I knew he was healing. At night, I listened to his breathing, natural, unforced, sleep without assistance, without interruption. I slept too, not deeply at first, but enough. I stopped replaying footage in my mind, stopped listening for footsteps that never came. The flat held us gently. Neighbours nodded but did not pry. The air smelled different, cleaner. One afternoon, Oliver came home with a drawing. It showed two stick figures, one taller, one smaller, a square with windows. "That is us," he said. "This is our house." I placed it on the fridge. I did not ask about his father. I did not answer questions that were not asked. Healing does not demand explanations. It asks for consistency. I kept routines. Dinner at the same time, baths before bed, stories every night. The GP appointments became shorter, then fewer. The word recovery appeared in notes, then disappeared altogether. One evening, as I tucked Oliver in, he looked at me seriously. "Do I have to take the vitamins anymore?" he asked. "No," I said. You never have to take those again." He smiled, relieved. "Good," he said. "I like falling asleep by myself." So did I. There were moments of grief. They arrived quietly. A familiar song, a memory passing through. I let them come, then let them go, because grief does not mean regret. It means change. I learned the shape of our new life. It was smaller, but it fit. It was quieter, but it was safe. And safety is not boring. It is fertile. It allows things to grow again. One Sunday morning, Oliver climbed into my bed with a book. "Read this one," he said. I did. His head rested against my arm, his body relaxed. No tension, no fear. Just weight. Real weight. Alive. As he drifted off, I realized something. We had not escaped. We had arrived. At a place where healing was possible, where time moved forward again. And that was enough. Life did not return to normal. It moved forward. There is a difference. Normal implies restoration. Forward implies acceptance. The days after everything settled were not filled with triumph. There were no celebrations, no sense of victory, just space. Space to breathe, space to think, space to live without checking doors or counting hours. I did not speak about Daniel, not to friends, not to neighbours, not even to myself. Silence was not avoidance, it was choice. Because when something ends properly, it does not need to be retold. Our routine continued. School, work, dinner, stories before bed. Ordinary things regained their weight. Oliver grew steadier with each week, not in leaps, in inches. His shoulders relaxed, his sleep deepened, his laughter arrived without warning. Once, while tying his shoes, he said something quietly. "I feel better now." That was all. No explanation, no drama, just truth. I did not correct him. I did not ask why. Healing does not require interrogation. I kept our world small, intentionally, not isolated, protected. The flat became familiar, the street predictable. The faces around us kind, but not intrusive. Safety does not demand attention. It works best in the background. Sometimes people asked questions. They were careful, polite. "How are things now?" I answered honestly. "We are well." That was enough. There was no urge to expose, no need to prove. Justice had already done its work, quietly, firmly. Revenge never crossed my mind again. Not because it was wrong, but because it was unnecessary. The absence of fear was more satisfying than any punishment. One afternoon, Oliver and I sat on a park bench watching leaves fall. He leaned against me without thinking about it. That simple wait told me everything. Trust had returned, not as an idea, as a reflex. At night, when the flat was dark, I sometimes lay awake for a moment, not listening, not waiting, just being still. Peace does not announce itself. It arrives gently, then stays. I did not become stronger in the way stories often suggest. I became clearer. Clear about boundaries, clear about silence, clear about what matters. I stopped confusing endurance with love, stopped mistaking patience for loyalty. I learned that protection is a form of courage, and that leaving can be an act of care. On a quiet evening, Oliver brought me a piece of paper. It was blank. "Can you draw our family?" he asked. I picked up a pen. I drew 2 figures, side by side. No background, no explanation. He nodded, satisfied. That was our truth now. Simple, uncrowded. The past did not disappear. It settled behind us, like weather that has passed through and moved on. There are storms that destroy and storms that reveal. This one showed me what safety actually looks like. It does not shout. It does not demand recognition. It lets a child sleep. It lets a mother rest. It lets life continue. If you are listening to this and recognizing something familiar, take a moment. You do not need to respond loudly. Just consider this. What does safety look like in your life? And if you wish, leave a quiet comment below, anything at all. Sometimes being heard starts with speaking softly.